yeah, Papa. Don't know what to do. I don't even have a joke this time. It's just the standard opening. If you're familiar with hearing me, I don't know why you'd be hearing this episode first, but welcome to Don't Know What to Do. It's your favorite Ranma One Half podcast of the several that you listen to. I'm, as usual, your host. I'm Elena, and today we have a bit of an unusual guest set up. Usually I just rope whatever random friends I can to hear me nag for 2 hours, but today we have a special surprise. We got some cool people. Would either of you like to introduce yourselves first?
I'm Harley Akers. I'm one of the co-founders of Rumic World at Farinkin.com, and my brother here is
Dylan Akers. I also help run Rumic World. We're about to celebrate our 30th anniversary in the early months of next year.
Yeah, wow, 30. It's so crazy.
It's been a while.
It's always incredible to find stuff that began on the internet have numbers that big.
Yeah, it's come from the GeoCity days way back when, and then we started it in, I guess, late middle school, and have just continued on through high school, college, graduate school, careers. So it's been the vast majority, I guess, of our lives have been centered around documenting and recording and talking about
Rumiko Takahashi.
Takahashi's work. Yeah.
Yeah. So for listeners who have maybe not heard of you two, I feel like they've definitely felt your influence, and it's interesting to say because especially nowadays when like fan wikis are so commonplace, there are so many people who can just dedicate all their time to just chronicling information, but like it's always fun to go down to a reference section and see what did they cite? What does this Wikipedia page cite for its information? And just seeing a link to a place that is just Farinkin.com.
Yeah. yeah. And, I would say, since we're both in academia, we're both college professors, when we were doing this in high school and earlier, we certainly weren't thinking about like sourcing and things like that. But as we've gone on, that's become more and more important, really documenting everything, going back, sort of investigating where certain quotes came from. Recently, I just, to share that story, Takahashi's thoughts on if Ranma became pregnant, that was always...
I did read that article.
Yeah, and so that was a question that came up a lot. Sometimes we would get emails about that, and we just finally...
Certainly since the 90s, since the early days of American fandom.
And we just sort of said, well, where is that quote coming from? What was the original sort of source? What was the context of that? And investigating that was a lot of fun and really rewarding. And that's, since we published that article, that's been one that we see cited on a lot of, like, on Reddit. It comes up frequently on Twitter, on Blue Sky and things like that. People often push that article around.
Yeah, because I read that, and like my takeaway was that like, so the exact details that people toss around are not accurate, but like the feeling people have when they quote it was accurate. Right. It's just sort of the context surrounding where the line came from. And like on one level, that's not important to a lot of people, but just having something to source, the fact that like researching that, and that's something I've done a lot more of for this podcast than I anticipated, of just like seeing something and just being like, okay, but how do I know that? How do I know necessarily this information? What is this Wikipedia page pulling from? I think the biggest one for me was we did an episode on this podcast researching the various image albums and things like that, and the most important question to me of was Ranma the first one to get that big of a push? Because I had a hard time finding other anime that there might be a couple, one or two songs on a soundtrack, but this concept that became so ubiquitous with anime from the mid 90s to the early 2000s. When did it start? And that was fun to research until I realized so much of it is just, I ended up on the pages for the Ranma 1/2 series as a whole, for Pony Canyon, for Kitty Films, and none of those pages referenced each other. I had to find them all individually, and in fact, one of your articles was very helpful in just letting me know what names to search, because if you just find a page on a wiki somewhere, including Wikipedia, you're still only getting a very small chunk of the story. They don't really link to other things. You have to dig in there, and it's very helpful, because I remember being very surprised the first time I explored your site and I clicked on the article section, and I assumed it was just articles you guys wrote, but no, you've archived everything you could find on that page.
And that's something that just in the last 2-ish years, we had started sort of a sort of sub-project of starting to catalog, I don't know another way of putting it, but I'll just call it orphaned artwork that comes from magazines and stuff that you see floating around, and you're like, okay, this is interesting, and this has an article attached to it, but where did this come from? What year is this? And so we've really started to go back, and at first it was just, okay, I want to know where this 2-page spread in this magazine came from. But then that led to, okay, well, we've got now all these articles and all these interviews that aren't available, and most of them are, from the late 80s, from the 90s, when, Ranma was on the air originally. And it's like, well, okay, let's get these out there and start kind of getting this material available, because you always end up invariably finding some little kind of tidbit of information that is, at least to us, and I think ultimately we always wonder, okay, is anybody going to be interested in, who directed this episode or what they had to edit out or whatever. But ultimately, we're interested in it. So if for nobody else, we do it for ourselves. And so, yeah, we've really started just in the last 2 years, put a tremendous amount of time and effort and
finances.
finances into building out the interview section and the article section and archiving all of these older magazines and stuff. We've and most of them, we had them just in our collection. It was just a matter of, okay, let's really devote the time to translating them and to getting them on the website after all these years.
Yeah, I think that's excellent work. Definitely relates to a lot of the stuff I've had to do this past year of looking stuff up. I do think it's interesting. You implied that it sort of began as more just collecting art and expanding past that. I could definitely relate to that, because for me, what began as well, I'm going to be uploading these episodes to YouTube and I just want the thumbnail to look pretty.
Mm-hmm.
So let me find some art. And that eventually leading to me being like, oh, a lot of this isn't readily available. I better start making backups.
Yeah. And we were, fortunate that we were pretty good about that. I mean, going back to some of our files that we've just started archiving from the 90s, from old FTP sites and things like that. Now it's really kind of a chore we do just when we have time, kind of renaming a lot of these so that they're more searchable, because we've got Now,
Yeah.
just thousands and thousands of images, not just from Ranma One Half, but from Takahashi's other works.
Yeah.
And it just becomes sort of laborious to even sort of find within our own sort of system things that we need. And just looking through them, that then became, well, if we're going to start renaming these, if we're going to start trying to organize these images, then we need to say, well, where did this come from? This is from a New Type magazine in 1993. This is from an Anime Age magazine in 1989.
This is original artwork from a calendar.
Yeah, things like that. And so the sort of fascinating thing about running the site is finding out what it is that people are interested in, because so many fans have different requests, different needs that they're wanting to investigate, whether it's, where did this song, that was one we used to get a lot before we had our, discographies up. They would say, where's this song from? Akane's Baka.
That section was very helpful to me.
Akane's Baka song. I mean, the names were not even like sort of official names. Were not, readily thrown around.
Yeah.
Just kind of vague names. Where can I buy that? Where can I, acquire that? I'm trying to think what were some of the other sort of things people used to ask about a lot. The Ranma pregnancy thing that we mentioned. All sorts of things. Where did artwork come from? And then things would go out of print. I can remember one of the early just items that we acquired was the OVA Movie 3 soundtrack. And that CD became incredibly difficult to find. We just, our friend randomly got that for us as a birthday gift when it was new, when it came out, on a trip to Houston. It was, none of this stuff was, and that's another thing, none of these things were readily available really anywhere. Certainly not where we live or lived at the time, a really rural sort of town in Mississippi. In the 90s, purchasing anything was impossible. And then once we sort of acquired just kind of a foundational collection of English things, and we started saying, well, there's more out there. There's Japanese manga, the original Japanese manga. There's, laser discs and things like that. How do we go about getting that? And then figuring out, again, in the days before things like auction services and Bai and things like that, how do we get those
from Japan?
From Japan. That was difficult. We used to have to send money orders to a guy that we had just randomly purchased some things from in Japan through eBay, and we just sort of learned to trust him, and we could send him just lists of things that we needed. And he would eventually email back and say, I found this and I found that, send this money order. So it was a lot of trust, a lot of, sometimes wondering if we were spending money on things that were going to come in bad condition or just not come at all. But he was a great resource for us. We bought like the music box collections, the single collection, the Ranma One Half singles collection through him. And so everything was just more cumbersome, I would say, to acquire things in the past.
Yeah.
It's gotten easier now, which in some ways I would say takes some of the joy away from the hunt of it, when you can find things more easily. But it's allowed us to build out things more quickly, more rapidly, and spend more time, I guess, on the important things than on the hunting for things.
Yeah. Yeah, and things have changed. It's been very interesting for me doing a lot of the research I've been doing, a lot of this podcasting, while the Ranma One Half remake is coming out, because that changes so much SEO for so many things. Things that used to be easy to find, now I have to be more specific in what I search, or things that used to be more easily available now aren't. I think a good example was I initially read the manga through an Internet Archive upload of one of the first one of the first fan translations from the late 90s, and I thought that was so fascinating, seeing the little notes and like referencing the time period they were in, and I thought that was so cool. But then at some time after the remake came out, those got pulled and were then replaced with uploads of the official
Hmm.
manga chapters, but through the Internet Archive's like library system checkout, where you need an account, only one person can check it out at a time. And that definitely tells me that, like, okay, something legal happened behind the scenes. And it is good that, like, the series is now, like, readily available for checkouts and stuff like that. For free, even for people who don't want to have to pay for like a Viz subscription for that sort of thing. Um, but also like it still felt like a shame to lose the history of like the fan translation part. There were images that were included from the scans they had, which I don't even know where they got them from because they're not in the official collections. There were, again, there were notes, translation notes, or just little commentary of this group from the late 90s, and that stuff I feel was worth preserving. But then the second problem came with the fact that whoever was in charge of this change did not do something that you guys said you did, which was titling things to make them more easily searchable, because every single individual upload, like, the fan translation was just one upload. Here's the whole series. Here's just multiple files, but as one upload. But then in order to do the checkout system, each individual volume is now separated. But they all just say like Ranma 1/2, Rumiko Takahashi, and then like the year of this reprint.
Mhm.
And there's no volume number. There's no nothing. You have to click on them, go to the preview, to like the table of contents, just to like know, well, what's in this particular volume. There's so much more effort just to read it than there used to be, and I know that sort of thing can be discouraging for people, and I'm like, you could do this more optimally. Just what you name your files goes a long way.
And that it's funny that you mentioned that. That reminds me of something from our childhood with Ranma that Viz used to. So the traditional release of this for the anime was Viz would put out a VHS tape, and
Yeah.
roughly every 2 months, a VHS tape would come out, and it would have 2 episodes per tape, and they always sort of they changed the seasons. For each season, they had sort of a subtitle, like Anything Goes Martial Arts for the second season, and
Yeah.
Hard Battle for the third season, and that was good, but they weren't exactly numbered volume 1, volume 2, volume 3, volume 4, and Viz would go about always kind of creating these sort of puns or jokes with their titles that would reference other movies, other films.
Yeah.
And so
Two guys, a girl, and a Japanese pizza place.
exactly, and at the time, that has some some meaning that it's here's this TV show on ABC, Two Guys, a Girl, and a Pizza Place, that lasted 2 seasons, 3 seasons, whatever. But 20 years later, that doesn't mean much to anybody, and it's certainly not helpful in understanding. Okay, this is episode 64 and 65 or whatever, and so it just becomes sort of this cumbersome thing of, okay, how do you catalog this? Thankfully, we were around at the time, and so we knew, okay, Martial Mayhem comes after Anything Goes Martial Arts, comes before Random Rhapsody season, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, when something gets this size, any sort of, whether it's manga or anime, you've got to be really kind of specific in how you categorize things and how you organize things and release things.
And even the reason
Viz
that
has kind of gotten away from that.
yeah, the reason that they were doing that, we used to talk to Toshifumi Yoshida, the American producer of the English release, the Viz release of Ranma 1/2 and Inuyasha later. They said that the reason,
Maison Ikkoku.
yeah, Maison Ikkoku, the reason that they did that was places like Suncoast Motion Picture Company that were carrying those VHS tapes at the time, they said they didn't sell well. They couldn't market,
Yeah.
Ranma 1/2 Volume 23 because someone would say, well, I need to buy then 22 other $25 VHS tapes just to make sense of this, when it's it's pretty accessible essentially from any point, more or less.
Yeah, but people won't know that just from looking at the covers.
Exactly, and so just giving it a number was pretty intimidating to the average shopper, or maybe a parent that would have picked that up for their child. And so they realized just giving them these sort of arbitrary, indistinguishable sort of names was better than giving a number. The seasonal sets, then, that became, it's easy to understand. There's 5 of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But when you're getting those just 2 episodes per tape, it was huge numbers that they were getting up to at the time, and so that was the logic behind those.
Yeah, definitely. It is just interesting how stuff changed. I haven't told this story on the podcast before. The thing that really, really got me into like making sure I have everything backed up for the sake of what I'm doing was the live action film where I watched it, and then like a few months later I needed to look something up and I couldn't find it anymore.
Yeah.
And I was like, uh-oh, that could happen at any point.
Yeah.
Who knows? This stuff could just like if I ever need to refresh my memory like before recording something, I could just find an episode on Tubi in like a couple seconds really quick, but like that's not guaranteed to be there forever. It's important to have to have my notes in check, to have everything I need to note so I can look it up without having to waste time figuring out where something is. And like so many things can easily change that whenever you find a resource that feels reliable, that means so much. There is one upload on Internet Archive that like I have it bookmarked because I don't know what's up with Internet Archive. Their search system just, I don't know. I will literally like type in exact words and it won't come up in the results sometimes what I'm looking for. So I have to be careful what I keep. And like what you described before about what you guys do with archiving, that sounds so laborious. And that's with you two limiting yourself to the works of one person.
Yeah. And it's funny because as and again, there's just so many things that when you start to sort of dedicate yourself to her work, it becomes things like short stories, color artwork. That took us, I think, Dylan, was it 23 years, 24 years?
24
to finally acquire all of the original color artwork that only appeared usually in Shonen Sunday. Some of that was reproduced in art books later, but mostly in Shonen Sunday. I can remember, way before we were, even halfway through that project, someone contacted us and they said, "What are you going to do? I think you need to back this up in case it's ever lost." And we just, we get a lot of emails like that, and we just said, "Yeah, well, we have backed it up." They said, "Well, please send me a copy. I'll back it up in case your house burns down." And again, we didn't know who this person was, and we just said, "Well, no, thank you." We knew what what he was wanting. He wanted a nice collection of the color artwork that we had been paying a few at that time, just a few, probably $100. Then that's ballooned into a pretty sizable price as we've had to get more and more.
And that's the thing too, with our stuff, it's because there is that sort of paranoia of, okay, digital media does not necessarily last forever. Somebody could decide to yank this down, to take this away, that we do own the physical, the magazines, the books, the tapes, the discs, because, just in case, we are big supporters of physical media, and that's why, it's not Takahashi related, but like companies like Discotech, who are really interested in going back and getting classic anime and making sure that it is released on disc. I am a tremendous supporter of that idea, of that concept.
Yeah.
If somebody were to, finally release like the OVAs of Fire Tripper and Maris the Shoujo and Laughing Target, I would be upset if it was just a digital release that was cleaned up. I would want it on, disc. I would want to be able to own it just in case something ever happened. But yeah, for sure.
And
That idea that
talking about losing things, that was something that we experienced just recently. We had done a translation of a Japanese program, a live action program called BS Manga Yawa, which was a sort of interview program where they talked about a manga series, and this was from the 90s, probably. This was like the early 1990s.
On Japanese television.
On Japanese television.
Yeah.
And so we had subtitled it, translated it, uploaded it to YouTube, and it was a laborious project just to do all the subtitle timing and everything. And it stayed up for a year and a half maybe. And
it was popular.
It was popular. We started a lot of Japanese viewers. We were getting a lot of Japanese comments on it, and we saw this big surge in viewers of it, mostly Japanese audience. Then it got copyright struck and taken down, and it was an NHK program. There was nothing that we could have done to say to sort of argue that it was something we legitimately owned. But yeah, and so now there's that. Sadly, that then just disappears, and it's just one of those things that just kind of vanishes into the ether. And somebody will probably remember, well, I thought I saw that somewhere at one time, and then it's gone, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely. Something I'm curious about, because you guys also, as part of the like renaming files, making things accessible, even if they don't always get to stay up. You list magazines, you list sources. My first thought was that sounds incredibly useful, even for things that have nothing to do with Rumiko Takahashi. Do you guys ever get approached by people researching other topics and being like, "Oh, these guys have a copy of this magazine that I've been looking for"?
Yeah, Dylan, tell some of those stories, Dylan. You've some of that.
And that's something on our. I guess I can kind of introduce this concept or this idea on our Twitter, because we had been buying all these magazines for all these decades to get color pages of of Ranma or of Uruseiatsu or of Inuyasha. We would have just tons. We do have tons and tons and tons of issues of Shonen Sunday and Big Comic Spirits, where Meizan Koku was, or Big Comic Original, where the short stories get published every year. And they would have other series in them, and they would have, color art for some of these other series, and it would seem like, it's such a waste, I'm sure that there must be Detective Conan fans out there who haven't seen these color pages from it, or there must be, fans, Pat Labor that want this article or whatever. And so I'm very interested in being able to share stuff like that, because I know how hard we work to find stuff related to Takahashi and her series. And so if I could make that easier for somebody to find something that they had been hunting for, that they had been after, I would love to be able to provide that for them. And so if they did come to the website, and they have done that, and say, "Oh, you have, this issue of New Type. It supposedly has an interview with the director of, I don't know, Utena or something. Could you scan that?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, of course. I'm happy to do that."
You had a guy contact you about
about
Magic Kaito. Is that what it was?
Yeah, Magic Kaito Kid from Detective Conan, that series that came before Conan. and he was really interested in the weekly magazine scans of it and the color artwork from it. I was like, yeah, of course. Let me see what I've got, and I'll send it right over to you. Because one of the things, I think you were talking about wikis earlier, and I would say that I guess our competition is a weird word to use, but like our main sort of competition as a website are wikis probably now. But it used to be websites run by fans, and
Yeah.
that just, that in the 90s, that was ubiquitous. It was like, teenagers all over the country, all over the world were, discovering anime and creating websites, easy, simple websites about their favorite series. And then those spaces sort of went away and all those websites just vanished. And that's one of the things I sort of really, really miss about those kind of early 90s days on the internet, where you could go and you could find, oh, here's this really good slam dunk website. Here's this really good Dragon Ball website. Here's this really good, you know, Sailor Moon website. And unless the series is just massively big, or it's kind of somebody that's like us that has had something up for a really long time, it just seems like people aren't. And I think it's just harder. I think that is one of the things that's become harder. It's harder to get started on something like that, but it's tremendously rewarding. And that's one of the things I think we're interested in, not necessarily seeing other Rumiko Takahashi websites, because I guess arrogantly we kind of feel like we have that market cornered. But I would love to see people making websites again, that go in depth into whatever series they're into. I would love to see a Golgo 13 website. I would love to see
Mitsuru Adachi.
stuff dedicated to Mitsuru Adachi or whatever. So yeah, for sure, and if anybody listens to this and they see something on the website that they think is something that I need something from that issue, yeah, please don't hesitate.
Yeah,
if we can.
one of the other things, you were translating all of the table of contents. So every issue,
Yeah.
of Shonen Sunday has the table of contents, where usually a fan will ask a question, and all of the authors in that particular issue will respond. I mean, it's often kind of banal topics about like what they're eating or what movie they saw or something. But I mean, yeah, we have that information for. We have all of it for Takahashi published now, which that goes back to what, 1980,
78.
78, 80. Well, they weren't doing them in 78. They weren't doing them.
Well, yeah, they started in like 83.
In 83 or so. But I mean, there's answers for every artist that has ever appeared. All of Takahashi's are online now. We've put those up, but we have scans of everything of it. It's a shame, it's a shame that Gosho Aoyama, who does Detective Conan and Yaiba, all his answers they're there for the taking if somebody wants to publish those, or Masami Yuki, who did Patlabor, or Makoto Raiku, who did Gash Bell. I mean, it's decades of stuff. It's the 80s, it's 90s, all the way up to today. It's somebody's favorite author. It's somebody's favorite series, and there's just all of this stuff that I wish there were places for it. There are people, we've gotten emails that are not even particularly big Ranma fans or Takahashi fans. They say they just like to go and kind of just comb through, because it's just like, oh, huh, there's just things that they weren't familiar with. A lot of people talk about, the notes that we're writing about each episode. All that was sort of inspired by Animego. They used to include sort of liner notes on paper in the VHS tapes, just folded pieces of papers with Urusei Yatsura just cultural notes. And we said, oh, we should put those on the site because somebody, people should be familiar with this. They should read those. Now they include them on the Blu-rays and things like
No,
that.
they don't.
Oh, they don't. Okay, they were on
No.
the DVDs then.
They were on the DVDs,
but
and they're not on the
not on the
Blu-rays, so
Blu-rays.
they're gone.
Yeah, so
except on
those
our
are
website.
so those are gone. But and then we said, well, we should write those for Ranma. We should write those for Maison Koku. There used to be a reputation that Urusei Yatsura was this very impenetrable series of hers. And as if Ranma was
Yeah.
not, as if Ranma did not have any of that, and Ranma does. I mean, it has really niche sort of jokes and humor in it. And I think people would have said, like, Kyokai no Rine, which was one of her more recent series, they would say, well, that's pretty straightforward. I mean, there was tons of weird in jokes in that that were not subtitled, or there was just no way to really explain them within the context of the subtitles. And so that was really rewarding to explore that and to get into that.
Because learning these things is fun. I think it's fun anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'm having a lot more fun than people listening to this.
It's fascinating to find out what it is that people like about the series, what it is. And again, sometimes, admittedly, it's a lot of it. Sometimes a lot of the emails that we get are things like, did Shampoo ever say XYZ? And you can tell that, this person is having some sort of debate with somebody on Twitter, and they're looking for some kind of ammunition. Those kind of emails are a little. I never know quite what to do with some of that. We get a lot of that kind of stuff. Not just for Ranma, we get a lot of Inuyasha related ones for that too. It seems like nobody ever asks about Urusei Yatsura with like couple debates, but it's always Ranma or it's always Inuyasha. It seems like never Maison Koku.
Yeah.
Never Rine or Mao or anything.
Yeah, definitely. I certainly didn't hear about Urusei Yatsura until much later after first hearing about Ranma.
I think, so much of Ranma's popularity, especially in the English-speaking world, because it came out at a time, and just to kind of give context to people who are younger, Ranma was sort of, and I don't think I'm biased in saying this, but I possibly could be. Ranma really was the first big hit anime in the United States before Sailor Moon came on television. I mean, like post Voltron or whatever, But the first thing that was marketed as this is this is animation from Japan. This is not just a Saturday morning cartoon that seems to be better animated than a lot of the stuff that you're used to seeing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and so Ranma was a big hit for Viz, and it really was what the company built itself on, and then expanded outward through Rumiko Takahashi's other works. But before Dragon Ball, before Sailor Moon, and then before Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, there was Ranma, and it really was this thing that kind of, in my opinion, sort of launched anime in a global way.
But it was always going to have the limitation of the nudity was always going to be something that was going to hold it back. It just, there was no amount of editing that could make Ranma airable on network television. When Sailor Moon would air, Dragon Ball was on syndication, and then on Cartoon Network, where it really found an audience. Ranma just it couldn't be made into appropriate fare. I wouldn't want it to be. I mean, I would never have wanted it to be cut or edited. Or I can remember, on early Dragon Ball, they even would like paste like clothing on some of the imagery and things, or edit out cigarettes and things like that.
The frothy mugs of water.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so, you know, I can remember people saying like, "Oh, I wish Ranma could be on television," and kind of selfishly, I was like, "Oh, I don't wish it. I don't wish that for Ranma. I don't want everyone to, I want them to have to dig a little bit."
But I think you could say that it became popular on its own terms. And I think that sort of that almost taboo nature of it's got a lot of nudity, it's got a lot of, kind of at, at some points, kind of bawdy humor or lewd humor. There's this character named Haposai and he likes underwear. That was something that American audiences had was mind blowing to them that they had never
Yeah.
seen this before.
Yeah, a lot of people were still in the mindset of like, this isn't your little brother's
Yes,
cartoon.
yes, this is not what a cartoon is supposed to be. That this is something else. And I think though that sort of, for lack of a better word, that sort of titillation, that the sex appeal of Ranma, and Ranma is, it is a sexy series. I would say it is you know, a series where all these characters, these young men and women, these teenagers are attractive and they're, you know, adventuresome, and there's, dozens of characters where people can kind of latch onto somebody that they like and say, I think Akane is so cute, or I think that Kuno is so handsome, or I think that whatever. And it really kind of opened the floodgates to what, especially in this country, modern fandom is. At least I think so.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely feel there's a reason that like Ranma, despite not being as popular as your Dragon Balls and Sailor Moons, definitely got a lot more like fan fiction and that type of fandom existing in early internet
Yep.
and like 90s anime culture. There's definitely a thing about it that sort of invokes that feeling of you are digging into this medium you're not used to and you have discovered something unique, and it's invoking feelings that you don't really experience through other medium, including some other anime that was being brought over around the same time. It's not quite the same.
And that's something, that might be hard for people to understand today in, at the end of
Yeah.
2025 when we're recording this. But when Ranma first started getting released in the United States in 19, what, Harley?
92,
92 maybe?
the
91,
manga
92?
around there.
Its main competition was Marvel and DC.
Yeah.
And that was something, that we had grown up with, was stuff like X-Men and Batman and Spider-Man and stuff. And we were, we've always been into comic books, but it was a complete sea change when we started getting into manga. And the first manga that we ever read was Ranma. And it just completely sort of opened our eyes. I remember, you know,
I mean, it was
being kind of
funny.
blown away.
You
Yeah,
know,
that was one of the biggest things is
I
that,
had never read
oh
a
my god, a comic book can be
legitimately,
funny.
yeah, humorous comic book. I mean,
This can make you
Other
laugh.
genres exist,
yeah,
Right. You
apparently.
know, it's not just superheroes punching things every issue. And so when you realize that, okay, this can actually make me feel something, whether it's, you know, laughter at first, or, you know, being moved by the romantic relationships or whatever, it's just kind of like, I can't go back to this other stuff anymore. And I think nowadays, obviously, there's a Marvel movie every year and a new Superman movie every so often, but the comic book market in this country is not anything compared to what manga is in this country.
Yeah, and that's saying something given how much Western comic industries have expanded since
Yeah.
the 90s. They
Yeah.
have drastically evolved. It's just still significantly behind what we see it could be.
Yeah, I mean it's just it'll never end. I mean that's I can remember people being sad about Ranma ending and people saying, well, will she ever do a sequel? And it's like, well, no, I mean all good stories have an ending. It's sad.
Yeah.
It's sad for the curtain to close and those characters, you kind of imagine them carrying on with their lives. But, Batman is still kind of doing essentially the same thing that he did in the 40s. And it's good to sort of to have endings. It's good to have a series conclude at some point, and then move on to another series, or dig
Yeah.
into the series, dig into Ranma, and find out about more than just what was on the page or what was in an episode. Figure out the background of what was going on then, what they were in response to, and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. I bring this up multiple times in this podcast that like Rama isn't even like my favorite series. That's like I didn't start this podcast because I love this series so much I want people to know about it. It's specifically what began as just me being like I want to watch something old.
Hmm.
Just something that like I've heard of but I never really got the time to watch. It's nice to do that from time to time.
For
And
sure.
it could have been anything. I just picked Ranma randomly. And then like a few months later the remake got announced, so I'm like, I better get going and catch up. And like in the process of that, just going from like, but wait, there's a lot of stuff from the manga that's different.
Yeah.
I didn't know this. Hold on. And like after a certain point of going from that to like now I'm listening to albums, just being like I've learned too much to do nothing with this information I've learned. I got to do something with it.
Yeah.
And again, like the main competition for something like that would be like wikis. A lot of people invest their time in wikis. I've given my criticism to the Rama wikis and wikis in general, but that's just sort of what I treat those more as just like little fan projects. Just like here's the communal garden. Sometimes people come in, do stuff. Sometimes people just leave, and the rose bush they were tending falls apart, and nobody notices. But like a feeling that I've consistently felt when looking up what other people were saying about Rumiko Takahashi or just Rama in general is a feeling I've consistently referred to as these people read the same Wikipedia articles as me feelings of like just here's the same basic information that keeps getting regurgitated over and over again, but it rarely goes past that.
Yeah.
And this isn't meant to be a slight against anyone in particular, because I understand why it's like that. And it's because a lot of the things I look up are like podcasts or YouTube channels or things that focus on just anime as a whole.
Right.
And this is just, here is their Ranma episode. We get one episode of their podcast or one video essay about Ranma buried in between their research on all kinds of anime.
Right.
And if you only have like 20 minutes to like an hour to talk about Ranma, there's only so many things you can fit in there and things you can research in that time while also having to look up these other 5 shows that you're researching.
Right.
And I get that. So I wanted to have something more. And I definitely feel like that's maybe similar to what you guys were doing of just having something that is more than just the basic entry level information. Not just for like not for archiving purposes. I think there's better resources for that, but also just I want to encourage people to do the same for anything.
Yeah.
I encourage what I call the deep dives.
Yeah.
Because again, I just picked Ranma at random. it could have been anything. This could have been a podcast for an entirely different show. But like the act of diving in, of having to look up more obscure things associated with this, having to look up like radio dramas or novels, who knows
That's
what you might
something.
find.
Yeah, that's something. We were just talking about this literally just a couple of days ago. We were watching some episodes of One Piece, and
Yeah.
I asked Carly. I said, "You think? I mean, I guess One Piece has albums. I guess they release the soundtracks of this. I don't know because I don't. Nobody talks about that. I'd love to know that. Just it's not like One Piece is my favorite thing in the world or whatever. But I'd like that
Yeah.
information. I'd like to say, okay, how many soundtracks of One Piece are there? How many of this exist? And I just like learning stuff, and especially when it comes to anime, I the thing, you know, we'll never, breaking news, Harley, we'll never make a One Piece website or a Naruto website or something like that. This is our area. This is our niche. But I would I would rather be. I'm always interested in depth, rather than breadth. You know, and so much of what the internet is let's talk about anime in general in an incredibly shallow way, but we're going to talk about whatever's new. And at least with us, it's okay, we are not wide. It is Rumiko Takahashi and only Rumiko Takahashi, but we are very deep. We're going to
Yes.
go back to day one of her career and talk about everything in you know minute detail.
And
I wish there were more things like that.
and as much, and Ranma is my favorite series, not just of hers, but just full stop. But I mean, it hurts me to say, nobody we don't get a lot of comments about Kyokai no Rine, which was her series
Yeah.
from the sort of the 2000s, the early 2000s after Inuyasha. Um, but I'm so glad that we have dedicated as much information to it as to Ranma, uh, because it deserved the attention that it didn't get necessarily in Japan or much abroad compared to her other series. Um, and there's hundreds of other shows like that by other creators that were hot in 1994, that nobody writes about, that were hot in 1986 that no one writes about, that had tons of interviews. That I wish anybody listening, I would say, go find that series and you know build that source, because you know I'll go look at it. I'll go look at it even if I haven't seen that series. I mean, I'm just
I
curious
want there to
about
be
it.
a good Demon Slayer website in 15 years.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned that it seems like when you listen to a podcast or something, everyone is kind of quoting from the same hymnal, the same wiki, as as college professors. I can
Sometimes
tell you,
they're quoting you.
yeah, sometimes. Uh, I can say, I get that same, research. I teach art history. I get that same Andy Warhol Wikipedia sort of research paper. I get that same Claude Monet sort of just taken from Wikipedia. Um, and so, yeah, so I know exactly what you mean when you say that it's a very sort of cursory look at things. But there is a hunger, there's an appetite for you know someone just to talk about. This is the issue of Shonen Sunday or Shonen Jump where this chapter appeared in. This is what was happening alongside it. This is what was being published at the same time, or this is what was airing against these shows. That was something else, that we got into recently. Is can we find the ratings, the Japanese
Yeah.
ratings of these programs nowadays? And again, that's frustrating, because things are on Netflix, or the information is just kind of harder to find right now. It's difficult to find that for the contemporary stuff. Ironically, it was easier to get it historically. But yeah, I mean, it just you know, there's probably 5 people that are interested in that, and we collated that and we said, okay, here's the top 10 just in terms of ratings, not in terms of quality, not in terms of these were the best stories or anything, but this is just where the viewership was for Ranma or for Uchihatsuro or Inuyasha. It's just interesting to maybe
to know.
just a few people, but that information should be out there. I mean, somebody should, talk about that, how and be able to say, this is how Ranma was doing against Dragon Ball Z at the time. This is how Ranma stacked up against, the other shows that were airing during that era, and sort of get a sense of its media footprint at the time.
There have been multiple times where, like, in the middle of recording, I just suddenly go, wait a minute, let me look up when specifically this came out. Because I didn't think yet, but, like, that could be important.
Yeah.
And it's, I tell myself I need to remember to start doing that before recording, because that stuff doesn't always come up within like a 10-second Google search.
Yeah.
I could find it. There are times where I need to find something and I'm like, when did this chapter come out? And I'm like, well, I could find on the Wikipedia page when the volume containing that chapter came out, but like, I want to know about the specific Shonen Sunday issue.
Yeah.
And like, I could find that, but not while I'm in the middle of recording with someone else.
Yeah.
Like, it's things that you have to prepare beforehand, because you never know
right, and
when that information will be needed.
A good example of that a lot of people don't realize, people will talk about the filler, the anime only episodes of Ranma, and one thing that they don't realize is that so we, again, when we're recording this, this is right after the second season of the Reiwa adaptation of Ranma has just concluded, at the end of 2025. Just a couple weeks ago, they did the Romeo and Juliet episode. The Romeo and Juliet manga chapter, when that was published originally, is when the anime started in Japan. So there was not a lot of material. They began the adaptation of Ranma 1/2 really fast. And then, so for if you're thinking about it, so from when the Romeo and Juliet story concluded, when Haposai debuts, Takahashi is hospitalized. She goes to the hospital for about 6 months, and the series goes on hiatus. She had appendicitis, if I remember correctly, and so there was just nothing published during that time period. And as a result of that, again, they start the series very quickly. There's not already a lot of material written, and then she's hospitalized, so nothing is published for 6 months. And again, the anime is already rolling. They're already having to make things. And then also, to complicate that, that was towards the end of the what people kind of call the first season, the first series of Ranma 1/2. That was when the Miyazaki child murders happened. They sort of reorganized some things. They, moved the Golden Pair episodes later because of the abduction
the abduction of Peach.
Yeah.
I remember reading about that.
And so that shifted. They had to then sort of backfill some things. Goshen Kugi, that was why he was, it's generally thought that that's why he was removed from the series. He should have appeared at that time, but his kind of...
I was literally just last episode wondering why specifically they got rid of him.
And so there's on the very first soundtrack, there is one of the titles of one of the songs is a Goshen Kugi theme, so it was very clear that they had planned to have him introduced, but then they likely removed him again. And again, people will always say, well, what's the source on that? Again, there's not going to be a source on that. Kitty Animation is not going to say, because of this child murderer, we had to make these changes. There's not going to be a press release, going into that. But at the time, the reason in particular anime and manga was sort of looked at askance was Miyazaki, who was the child abductor.
Saotome Miyazaki.
The media sort of branded him as an otaku, sort of a obsessive killer. He was not particularly any more so than most Japanese people at that time that were his age, but that was kind of the media approach to it. And then as a result, there was a lot of kind of backlash against manga and anime violence in manga in general. Yeah, not Ranma in particular.
Yeah.
But as a result, there was sort of a self-censorship, and Ranma, that sort of showed up in Ranma by taking Gosen Kugi, moving him much later in the series. Any sort of references to kidnapping or abduction, like with Pichon and the Golden Pair, it was a little, they put that a few months later when things had sort of simmered down a bit.
Yeah.
And so in that, that, coupled with Takahashi's illness and kind of running out of material or getting close to kind of, covering all the material that was available, results in a lot of the early sort of anime-only stuff. And you can look at one of the earliest, one of the very first anime-only, I guess one of the second or third, was the martial arts delivery girl race. There's a character, Kaori Daitokuji, I think is her name. She's essentially Ukyo, and in the sense of that she was engaged to Ranma basically in the same fashion that Genma wound up getting Ukyo engaged to Ranma. Ukyo had appeared in the manga 3 or 4 months before that episode aired, and so basically the writers just said, Ukyo, this character, is too far away. There's still material we have to cover to get to her, but we can more or less, cut out these kind of vague characterizations and circumstances that will be connected to Ukyo later, and just paste them on this character and have her,
who is played by Hiromi Suru.
Yeah, who is also played by Hiromi Suru, who would then go on to voice Ukyo, some months later. So, and again, that information is, when you're just watching it, when you're just kind of, marathoning these episodes, that sort of context is lost. The background of why this was done this way, why this was organized. And sometimes, even in the new Blu-ray releases, they reorganize. They have placed the Golden Pair episodes earlier where they chronologically would have been, where they would have originally appeared, which is not in the air date order that appeared in Japan. And so people, you wouldn't even expect people to necessarily know that these days. And so that's why I think having things like, this is when this episode aired, giving this sort of context for it, it's fascinating. It's fascinating to explore what was going on in society at the time too, through these things.
On the other end of the series, when the TV series ends and the OVAs start, it's interesting to know, okay, how much material was there to work from when they're choosing the OVAs? How was the manga about to end when they released the last OVA, which was the Akane,
the doll,
the
right?
haunted doll.
Yeah.
One.
And it's like, could you have maybe put out 1 or 2 more and gotten to the last storyline, And so, yeah, when you know, okay, well, this is the chapter, this is where the manga was when this was released, you can start to kind of do those calculations and have those discussions and those conversations, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, those are definitely interesting. There have definitely been several moments of just me asking these questions that, like, I know I'll never get answers to, because chances are the answer is some director of an episode heard something from higher up or like, maybe we should change this, or like, oh, we need to move this around, cuz the takeout race episode you mentioned, like, that one fascinates me so much because, yeah, like, as you explained, they do insert this new character that's never seen again in the anime, but they also took out Shampoo,
right,
who was present in the manga version, because that episode came out before Shampoo was reintroduced in the anime series. And I remember thinking, like, what led to these decisions, because they had to make these changes for a reason. But, like, it's hard to imagine ever getting the full context, because some of these decisions are even made on whims, or because of things that just well, someone thought it was a good idea and no one really felt strongly enough to contest it. Like, yeah, sure, we'll do this episode out of order. Why not?
Yeah.
And changes just happen naturally. So it's hard to ever know why, but it is, even if you don't get clear answers, it's still fun to just dig in there and do your research, and you might find some interesting things. I didn't know that context for what could be the reason they took out this nerdy stalker character
Yeah.
that was maybe not what people wanted to see on TV at that time.
And it's interesting even now to read. So Konosuke Uda, the series director for the new adaptation, in recent interviews, especially for season 2, because Gosen Kugi now appears and Haposai appears, he talks about, and Takahashi even talked about it in an interview. She said she sort of laughingly said that she had some curiosity about broadcast standards and if the series could even meet those standards. And he said,
Yeah.
there are things that we just can't show these days compared to what we could have gotten away with, in 89, 90, when the series was originally airing. And I'm kind of sometimes a little mortified. I see fans, I've seen on Reddit people saying like, I just wish they would leave out Haposai. I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah.
how sad, how sad to think that sort of thing, because I look, I get that he's not everyone's cup of tea, and I know certainly that I don't want to sound like an old fogey, but the younger generation have maybe less tolerance for some of that kind of humor. But that was, that it was of its time, and it was, to remove things that are, antiquated or maybe no longer what you would see in society. I just don't think that that's a good approach to erase or to, remove that kind of thing. I think they've been very they've handled any sort of edits well. It's been very deftly done, I think.
Yeah. And they're definitely like, I always think it's better to make changes rather than to just cut something out altogether.
Yes.
Right.
And like, because conversely, there are also things you can do nowadays that you couldn't do back then. There are things that would be easier to adapt, and nothing is ever clear cut of, well, we can't do this anymore. So that's just it. There's always layers to this of how do you approach something when adapting. I've had an interesting time, especially this season, because it's covering the era of the classic anime that had the most changes
Yep.
made from the source material, and so there's a lot more to compare and contrast as to like, well, what things did they do potentially better, what things they did do worse, and what things are just different, maybe not better or worse, but just signs that these are different people from a different time handling this subject matter in a different way.
Yeah, and Uda, the series director, he's talked about, it's he one of the things that he said he prioritized was having more women involved, more women animation directors, more women episode directors, because he said, I want there to be sort of a woman's view on it, which is a little bit, I must say, a little bit ironic considering that the whole series is created by a woman, and her view is very already established.
It is the view.
It is the view. Yeah, it is written from a woman's perspective.
It's good to have that in context of like not just the manga but just like adaptations. Like, what are other studios doing with their adaptations? What type of people are there? Because like, something I have talked about with regards to the remake is that even when something is like a shot for shot remake identical to the manga, it's still not the same,
right?
Because of the different medium.
Yeah.
And the way you adapt it from the medium still affects the story. So like, you're never going to get like, this is just Rumiko Takahashi's vision. You're always going to paint it in some way. And it's always really interesting seeing how the remake is handling that, of like, well, what are they choosing to change? What are they choosing to keep the same? And even if they do keep it the same, a lot of the times it still feels different, and asking myself, well, why is that? Why does it feel different compared to before, even if like the exact lines and the angles characters are framed at are the same? It looks like the same art, but it's not.
Yeah, and I think, they have, because it's not going to be in the same way that the original series was weekly, constantly. There were no breaks.
Yeah,
It was constantly airing, whereas this is going to, basically, as it hopefully carries on after season 2, I think it will. Um, we're always going to get these kind of 12 episode increments, and they're going to always have to say, like, we can't let it breathe. We're not going to have these kind of extra episodes to sort of extend, uh, which is a criticism a lot in adaptations of manga. I can think of Dragon Ball, or you can think of One Piece, where they have to stretch out the battles. They have to stretch out some of these things, again, just to make sure that they're not catching up to the comic. That's not a problem with Ranma, but sometimes, stretching things out a little bit does give it a little bit more time to build, a little bit more
definitely.
time to breathe. That we're not going to get that as much this time. I think that they've done a good job. I think that there were times with the new Urusei where it felt a little rushed. It felt like some characters had to be cut, or not cut, but just less sort of focus on them. I do think that there's a little bit of that with the new Ranma series, but not overly so. I can for, again, Takahashi fans, you can look at something like Inuyasha: The Final Act, where they came back. They had 26, I think, episodes. Is that right, Dylan? About that,
Yeah.
to basically to cover 7 or 8, maybe more volumes of manga. I mean, it was
More than that.
it was tight. It was a lot had to be compressed, and at times it felt like, oh gosh, this is too fast. This is too condensed. This is, but
Yeah.
again, if you had asked me in 1996, would I rather have that so I could see the end of Ranma? Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. I mean, again, I can, I wished. So when Ranma ended, we were 15, and when I realized, again, because there was such a delay, there was such a lag, when I realized that the anime uh, was not going to finish, was not even going to come close, like not even close to adapting everything, I said, well, surely, I hope there'll be a sequel. I hope that someone will, and then 5 years turned to 10, 10 to turn to 20, and I realistically, I didn't think that it would ever be redone. When the Urusei remake happened, I said maybe there's a chance, maybe. So I was, thrilled, but I'm still nervous. I'm still nervous that it will end before it gets past, what was done before. I can remember
Stop
when,
at
Yeah.
season 5.
yeah, when they first announced it, part of me was saying, like, God, I just hope that they'll just start where it left off. That wouldn't have made any sense to do it that way, really. People would
Yeah,
have said,
definitely.
well, I don't understand even what this story is if they just started. But yeah, I mean, I'm super nervous that they'll get to maybe Miss Hinako, which they covered in one of the OVAs, and then they'll just say, okay, well, that's the end, and that would be really painful for that to happen again.
Yeah, that is a thing where like the remake has skipped a few things,
Yeah,
and like some of them are I'm like, well, okay, when you only have 12 episodes, you want to make good use of them.
right,
We're not going to waste one of them on the tea ceremony arc
right.
for a character that's never going to come back. And I'm curious if they do continue how the third season would go, because we're just going to get more and more examples like that as time goes on. Like I always found it interesting when people, before the first season of the remake came out, I saw just so many articles talking about how like this was going to be more faithful. It's not going to be filled with filler like the classic anime. And I'm just like, okay, but the manga also had a lot of filler in it. Like that's like in the classical sense of the word. People use filler to simply just mean not canon. But in terms of like, well, here's just a one-off chapter where goofy stuff happens and it's not important. You can just skip it. We're gonna get way more of those.
Yeah,
So, like, I'm curious, are they going to be more selective? Because definitely, it's like with this second season, I feel like the stories they did choose to adapt are they're going for more like they want a proper starting and end point for each individual season. They
season.
want a core theme. And it felt like this scene, they wanted to focus more on like Ranma's cast of friends and rivals growing.
Yeah,
Here are the new characters. And it's more of like, here's the collective bunch. And like you would have gotten less of that if they chose to like stop and adapt stories that don't further that part of the series.
right.
I
So I'm
imagine
curious
that
what they would choose to do with a third season.
the third season is going to be much more action focused. That it seems like they're going to start with the breaking point, and
Yeah, they did skip that one.
yeah,
Right.
that was kind of that's kind of a strange one to skip because that's sort of Ryoga's sort of signature technique or whatever.
And Akane's
But
cooking is introduced
yeah,
in that.
and so I think that's sort of my just initial very early days impression that I wouldn't doubt that the third season is going to be like really action heavy.
That does sound like a good focus because the breaking point arc does feel like a good starting point for a season. Just to like, hey, it's been a year since you've last watched season two.
Yeah,
Maybe
Yeah.
here's a new starting point of what we're focusing on now.
and that maybe getting through to Ranma's Hiryushotenha or something like that.
And you can kind of pick like sort of story beats. You can imagine, I would say, ending. It wouldn't be the next season. It wouldn't be a season 3. It would probably be like a season 4. You could end that with the Pantheos Taro storyline that has a kind of an epic.
Yeah.
They travel a bit. That most of all of the characters, or kind of the main characters, are in that. Then you could have, I really hope at some point the Herb storyline. That's a one I desperately want to see. But again, that's going to take a lot of episodes.
Yeah.
That's like going to be at least, I would say, 3 episodes at least, if not maybe 4 to be kind of comfortable. And then you start to wonder, is there any need to? I mean, there is a need. There is kind of a need in terms of the narrative to have the Ryugenzawa, the Shinosuke storyline, even though that was very well animated as the OVAs. That was given a full proper adaptation. They didn't really cut anything. There's not really a need to re-include it. But if you're only watching this series, I mean, a lot in terms of Ranma's relationship with Akane happens in that storyline.
Yeah.
But would I like to see? Would I like to see Yo-Yo? Would I like to see those kind of those characters that are only in one chapter? Would I like to see the children that think Haposai is Santa Claus? I'd love to see that story. I
Yeah.
probably won't get to see that story though.
Yeah, it's definitely different when you have like over 100 episodes. You have room
Yeah.
to just let one of them be something dumb and goofy because to me a majority of Ranma is that, especially from like after the Pantyhose Taro arc. We just sort of settle into this ongoing like motions of here's a bunch of one-off stories that get shorter and shorter until we get to the next major one, which is going to be even longer than the last big one.
Yeah.
But then we'll go back to the short stories again.
Yeah.
Rather than having a more consistent pacing throughout. And that definitely seems like if they do continue, again, they would have to get to like a 4th season or so to even get to that point. But yeah, what decisions would be made? I wouldn't want them to just skip either of those. I wouldn't want them to just focus on action. But also those are the bigger stories. Those make the most sense to focus on first. And like, is it worth skipping some of the other stuff to get to those? Or is it better to just, get as much as you can along the way, knowing that we might end up getting to the, Hiryu Shotenha as like the finale and then no more Ranma again? Would that be preferable to some? Probably not, but to others maybe, if it means getting more of the stuff along the way.
And one of the things that I was also kind of thinking about just when you invited us was as much sort of negativity as some of the anime only episodes get, Uh, there's a lot of not in all of them. I mean, some of them the animation is not strong, but some of them have really good animation.
Yeah.
Weird stories, but because they don't have a manga chapter that they have to be kind of anchored to. They have some interesting cuts. They have some interesting direction. The fight. I
Yeah.
think that sometimes people clip a lot and put on YouTube things of Genma and Ranma fighting with like stabs on the rooftop.
Yes.
That's a
From
great
the
that's a great sequence. One of the just weird episodes, Sasuke's Mission Impossible or Mission Improbable, has some really
yeah.
interesting cuts. And mostly kind of driven by Shigeru Chiba, who played him. A lot of kind of interesting performance in that. And again, those are really good creative episodes that, that I'm glad got included. We won't have any of that this time. And again, I don't lament that at all. I mean, I'm glad to see Takahashi stuff. I'm glad to see really thoughtful, I think much more so in this series than in the original action choreography. It looks
Yeah.
legitimately sort of martial arts like when in the original series, I can think of just like a handful of really nice choreographed fights. For
Yeah. A
example,
lot of the times the action is more on the cartoony side.
exactly, yeah, like there was the great fight of Ranma versus sort of the butlers in one of the when Pichan gets kidnapped and he fights. That's an early episode. Uh, the OVA fight between Ranma and Shampoo from the Reversal Duel storyline. That's always
Yeah.
a nice, really nicely put together one. But I feel like we're getting a lot more of those, a lot more quality kind of, kick, punch, parry, kind of do a backflip, which it's nice to see
It
that.
looks cool.
Yeah, it looks great. It looks really great.
Yeah. Yeah. So you guys have been really good at like helping me segue into the talking points I wanted to get into. Um so I guess something that hasn't come up enough as much you guys have mentioned um uh, you're both professors and
Yeah.
I'm interested because as you've also said you guys started doing like the Rumic world stuff when you were much younger. I'm curious how much of that influenced your decision to go into this career or like vice versa. How much of that influenced what you've been doing with the archive stuff since then? Like that feels like the something that just sort of intertwined. Like that feels like it has made this a bigger part of your life than I feel most people would say.
Yeah, Dylan, do you wanna start off or?
Well, I think it's the through line is probably more with you and your studies.
So when I was an art major, a printmaking major in undergrad, and I minored in Japanese. And I said, well, I'm going to do a study abroad. So I did my junior year of college abroad. I studied at Kansai Gaidai University in Hirokata City, which is sort of halfway between Osaka and Kyoto. And that was, and I did that because of Takahashi. I did that because I wanted to learn to read. I wanted to learn to be able to do better research. Um, and the work meant a lot to me. The culture meant a lot to me just from being introduced to it through, predominantly through her work, certainly through other series as well, but predominantly through her work. And I said, I want to go live, you know, in that world that gave birth to this, at least for a little while. So I was there for a year, and just experiencing Japanese school, not high school, but college, was tough. it was hard a lot of the time. Uh, but the joy of that was, again, Ranma had ended by then, so this was 2002. So this was like right after September 11th and all that sort of came with that in international travel. Inuyasha was still going every week. I would go to a convenience store. I'd buy an issue of Shonen Sunday, and I would quickly, hastily, sort of give a brief sort of summary to it on our message board. This was in the days before Reddit, so just
Yeah.
our own message board. I had didn't have a cell phone that had cameras. I remember I was in Japan and I was amazed that their cell phones had cameras. The ones we had in America at that time, it had not quite made that jump, and they were texting pictures back and forth, which I was like, oh my gosh, this is like, this is the future. This is like a Blade Runner world in Japan. So I remember I had a digital camera, just a Sony, just bulky digital camera. I would take pictures of the Shonen Sunday issue and go back to my dorm room and upload it and send those back home to show, oh, this is what came out in Japan. And again, there was just not much of that. There was not a place where you could say, this came out today in Japan. Here are images from that chapter, within a few hours. This was sort of, I would say, proto scanlation. I mean, there was a little bit of that. It certainly was not, there was not
Weekly.
not weekly, and certainly not like one central source. You had to have like IRC pages. You had to really kind of know how to find that sort of stuff. So that was exciting. That was exciting to be able to say, here's what came out today to our visitors to our site. The second Inuyasha movie came out while I was over there. I saw that in theaters. That was really exciting. It was like on I think I skipped class that day and went to go see it. And it had been out. I had to find like a sort of like a second run theater because it was hard to even again figure out where things were showing over there. And there was it was me and it was like a mother and her probably preschool age child that just didn't have to go to school that day, and it was like a matinee showing. And so I mean, it's no small thing to say that it's really given me direction. It's really sort of steered us in a big way. Then when I came back, I was sort of tired of printmaking, which is what I had been studying, and decided to get my master's in art history. And so much of the sort of art history background, the research background, the writing background has been, I've been able to put that into. When we decided, that was another thing, COVID, when the pandemic happened,
Yeah.
we were both teaching. That gave us time, finally. I said, one of the things I have to do is, realizing that the site did not look great on mobile, realizing that everyone was now accessing it through cell phones. And I said, well, I have to figure out now how to code this for cell phones. So that gave me time to sit down and say, let me teach myself how to do this. And then we said, okay, what are the parts that we need to improve? How do we compete now in an age of wikis, of fan wikis, where they're going to have, 30 people writing profiles? And so we said, well, we have to have sources. We have to be very clear about, where this information comes from. And then we also said that one of the things that wikis are not ever going to have, not ever going to really do, is articles and interview translations and giving that kind of context. And so, yeah, it's always sort of, my background, our background has really sort of helped with that. And Dylan, what would you say was how it's filtered into your?
I mean, sometimes I look at sort of our lives, and you could tell me if you agree or disagree, but that we kind of have two jobs. That there's the job we get paid for, and then there's the job we don't get paid for, which is running the website. And there, I mean, I enjoy psychology, which is what I teach, but I enjoy it as a means to support like our Rumiko Takahashi addiction, as it were. She more than probably anybody else outside of our family has certainly had the most influence on us, and traveling to Japan, spending time in this culture, building something that we have just spent hundreds of thousands of hours dedicating ourselves to since we were teenagers. And 30 years almost now of daily dedication to something is, I think, unusual.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely not a lot of sites
Yeah,
that lasted past a certain point.
and I think at some point that's what it turned into. It's not a chore by any
No,
means. It's
not at
hard
all.
work. It's hard
Yeah.
work, but
It's always
it's
enjoyable.
something, yeah, that we really love doing. And I think one of the things that we realized early on is, if for nothing else, we have to make it for ourselves, that the audience we're always trying to sort of reach is, you know, I want to write something that Harley would be interested in, or Harley wants to write something that I would be interested in as a fan, and hopefully, other people will find that interest. But yeah, Rumiko Takahashi is a tremendous part of our lives. The website and her works have been hugely influential to us on a daily basis
Yeah.
for 30 something years.
Yeah. You don't do something voluntarily for 30 years without pay unless it's
Yeah,
something you love doing.
for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that's great. I definitely like again to like listeners, even if you've never like heard of Rumic World, the website, like I definitely feel its influence is there because again, go to Wikipedia on like their list of episodes and they've got the episode summaries and at the bottom of the page the source they cite is your website. uh there have been wiki pages I've seen where I'm like, well, this, some pages, again, you've got so many people being working so hard on editing certain things, but then there's other more obscure stuff that people don't look into. Like I find it so funny how many things will just, here is a list of all the different video games and they all have like the same one or two sentence
Yeah.
description that could be found on your website
Yeah.
because few people look past that. They're just like, well, here's the list for people that do want to dig there. People have done the work. I'm not going to do that, but
Yeah.
it's there.
And again, I'm glad you brought that up. One of the things that I think we always get sort of nervous about is people will come to our site and they'll say, "Oh, well, this is the same thing it says on this wiki." Just for anyone listening, please realize if it says the same thing, it's because the wiki copied it from us. We didn't copy it from the wiki, and so we've always been, even from the very beginning, that was something that was important to us, is making sure that what we're writing is at least original. And then as time has gone on, as we've learned Japanese, including Japanese titles, including all that sort of information, it has become more important as well, just to give that sort of context, to give that sort of broader context to it. And like you said, the video games certainly with Ranma were a huge part of our introduction to it. That was even before I got the manga. I got the Super Nintendo game for Christmas Christmas '93. That was really the first Ranma anything that we got, and again, just the story of it was humorous and weird, and just being sort of amused by how interesting it was, and then that's what got us to read the manga. But then realizing that there was not a lot of information about clearly with imagery and things like that, saying these are the video games that dealt with Ranma. Here are the characters that appeared in that. You might find just a title. You might find that this was a role-playing game or this is a fighting game. But we said, well, we have to dig a little deeper. I think one of the sort of, at least for me, one of the small disappointments we've had recently was we said, oh, well, we'll play the Maison Ikoku Nintendo game. We'll do a playthrough of that and put it on YouTube. And we said everyone's going to be really excited to watch this, and it did not reach a big audience, unfortunately. But it was incredibly fun to make. It was
just fun.
We really enjoyed putting that together, regardless of if the algorithm shared it out or anything. But it reached, and it reached, and that's one of the other things is, through Takahashi, is we had, Nintendo people, not necessarily manga people, but Nintendo people sort of saying like, oh, this is
Yes.
interesting. This is not a game, and we hear from them sometimes, Super Nintendo or Super Famicom fans talking about, oh, this game or this, or, Mega Drive or Sega, not Sega so much, but, and it's interesting, all the different sort of facets, all of the different sort of cultural touchstones that you can reach through the context of Takahashi's work, because she's had video game adaptations, because she's had manga, because she's had anime, because she's had, as you mentioned before, live action adaptations as well. There are people that have contacted us about, the drama actors that are fans of their work, or are looking for an interview with Yui Aragaki, who played Akane in the live action drama, reach out and say like, I'm not familiar with Ranma, but I like her work, da 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 da. And you just say, yeah, I can, give you scans of the photo shoot she did from this magazine where she was promoting Ranma and this and that. So it's just interesting to sort of meet this very sort of
and music. So much of our taste
music,
in J-pop is through stuff from Ranma and Maison Koku, that it's like, oh, I really like Picasso. I want more Picasso.
Yeah.
Let me find more of their albums. So it's completely permeated our taste in everything.
Yeah, I do like that, the sort of like sense of community. How like it's just, you never know. Like again, some random person researching a completely different subject that it isn't even your thing will be like, hey, this like um the video games were the most interesting part for me to research, because it's like I wanted to check out all of them.
Yeah.
And like some of them, that's easier said than done. I remember Hiryu Densetsu for the MSX and PC-98 was the hardest one for me to get down, and it eventually led to me watching an archive video of a Japanese streamer who specifically plays just like old PC games from the 90s.
Yeah.
And that was his thing. And I'm like, ooh, that's so cool. I bet he's got some interesting stories.
Yeah.
Like, not even just, and like Ranma was just, a lot of these 90s PC games were adaptations of stuff.
Right.
And this was just one of the ones he picked. And I'm just like, I'm glad this is here, because otherwise I wouldn't have had any way to play it. I tried.
Yeah.
I couldn't get the MSX emulator working, but like, yeah, it's always fun to discover these completely separate niches on the internet that you just happen to stumble upon, and you're like, oh, that's exactly what I need.
And in terms of archiving it, one of the things that, and that we sort of ask ourselves doing, in particular with the video games, lately it'll be something like, the Ranma characters are in this cell phone game that is not a Ranma game, but it'll have Ranma costumes. And I'll say, should I archive this? Should I mention this on the site? And then you realize, because when the server shut down for this game, it's gone.
Nobody will remember.
Yeah, nobody will remember it. Nobody will, these pictures will disappear probably. And if we don't back them up, and if we don't put them, in a place where people can at least say, oh, this existed. There was a brief window of time where, this, innocuous cell phone game of bubble popping or, whatever had Ranma costumes in it, then that'll just be, that'll just go by the wayside. And so it has to be sort of mentioned, and it has to be sort of documented.
Yeah. This podcast is how I know that the Battle Cats wiki is one of the best wikis I've ever found, because their individual pages, they have like a sprite image editor where you could just load up for each individual character, you could just load up the character and select the specific animations and go to like frame by frame and change the background, and they even let you turn things transparent in case you just want to get an image of this and then edit it yourself, which I did for a thumbnail. All because I was just like, oh yeah, there's an Ukyo costume here.
Yeah.
And I needed an image for the thumbnail, and I just felt like, okay, like the fandom for this one like mobile game is incredibly dedicated, and they're the only reasons I was able to get a thumbnail for that episode. That I'm like, I am very happy with this. I'm very happy that I have an image of the little battle cat version of Akane with the little outfit on. But yeah, so yeah, I do think that's all fascinating. I suppose the last topic I wanted to talk to you guys about is just the the overall like 90s anime fan culture. What I'm always so fascinated by those because it's similar to what we're seeing here with the internet, but even more so. There's a lot more like it feels like a community,
Mm.
even though it's all like people disparate in their own little niche corners doing their own separate things. But there's so much overlap. There's so many stories behind, how did you acquire these CDs? How did
Yeah.
you meet the guy who's your connection on eBay? How, all these things. It feels like such a different world that is just lost to time, and I'm always so fascinated by that. I've jokingly said that like we need like a sitcom set in the 90s of like a comic book shop run by Miami Mike, and just the stories of working for the guy who's the one place in town where you can buy manga and anime stuff from.
Yeah. I can
It's
remember, when we were first getting Ranma, there was a guy at the comic book store because this was before it broke out into bookstores and Borders. This is when you were buying just single floppy issues like a traditional American comic book, 2 chapters a month. And this guy that worked at the comic book store where we bought them, he said, "Well, this series Ranma, it turns into a horror series later." And I was like, again, we had not bought many issues by that point, but I was like, I cannot imagine that being the case. And again, this is like 1994 maybe.
Turns out this man just had a very strong phobia of ducks.
Right, and so I was like, this can't be. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about or something. And then years later, that comment always kind of stuck with me. You realize, well, and he said he heard it from a friend. That was always what people used to say. But then you realize as you're like watching the anime, there is like this kind of span of about, not consecutive, but pretty close together. You have these episodes of, let's see here, The Witch Who Loved Me, a Japanese ghost story. Then shortly after that, you have, let's see, there was
the haunted sword.
Yeah, the Ranma and the Magic
that
Sword.
Possesses Kuno.
And then right after that you have the Haposai, the Last Days of Haposai, and they all have this kind of weird, vaguely supernatural sort of aspect to them. This kind of dark, and you sort of say, well, somebody that is only seeing these handful of episodes, I can see then why they would maybe make this judgment incorrectly.
Yeah.
And
all
so
you have is this one VHS tape with 2 episodes in it per season.
Exactly.
Because you can't get your hands on the rest. That's what Ranma is to you.
Yeah, and it was fascinating. Information was certainly not reliable, but it left a lot of gaps that allowed you to sort of make guesswork and sort of fill in things. People were very dependent on any little shred of like information that they could get from a friend. Again, this is in the days before the internet, and like I said, Dylan and I are from a very, very, very small town, very rural town in Mississippi. There was not a comic book culture here, let alone a manga or anime culture, and so when we got internet, I'm trying to remember what year that would have been. I don't know, Dylan, 97,
97 maybe,
96,
yeah.
97. Well, no, the site's 30 years old, so 96. We just realized, oh my, there's a whole world of other fans out there. There were all these fan sites. Again, in the early 90s, it was mostly Sailor Moon, a lot of Slam Dunk, a lot of Dragon
Yeah.
Ball, maybe a little Yu Yu Hakusho, maybe, I think. And then a ton of Ranma. I mean, Ranma was wildly popular on the internet, certainly
And
then.
that's the thing, now it's almost like an embarrassment of riches where pretty much everything gets licensed and
Yeah.
translated, at least for anime, where we get,
Yeah.
same day releases and everything shows up on Crunchyroll or whatever. But like Harley said, we live in a really tiny town we did as kids, and I can remember every month, especially for the anime, because that wasn't a reliable thing to get at our local comic book store, somewhat local comic book store. We would have to call. Viz had Viz shop by mail, and
Yeah.
that's
Not even the internet. You had to order by phone.
Order by phone,
Yeah.
and we'd beg our parents, can we get a Ranma tape this month, please? Can we get a Maison Koku tape this month? And we called that phone number so many times. I still remember it at 1-800-394-3042. I have no idea what that I'm sure doesn't go to anything related to Viz anymore, but we would just call them every month and say, I'd like to order the new Ranma tape, please. And it was, but there was something special about how hard it was to get things, that you couldn't just, turn on Crunchyroll and, there's the new episode. Turn on Netflix. There's the new Ranma episode already for me.
Well, you had to consume it in much smaller dosages. You couldn't marathon anything really. You were watching. You kind of grew with the series, and that was one of the things that was sort of exciting. Was Ranma was coming out for the longest time as 2 chapters a month. So again, that's half the rate it was even coming out in Japan. Japan was getting 4 chapters a month, with Takahashi just publishing weekly and Shonen Sunday. And so again, we started reading Ranma in 1992. That was pretty early in its publication run. The first comic book I bought was the Gosen Kugi, his debut, that chapter. It did not end in America until after college. So all of middle school, all of high school, and all of college is how long it took to publish Ranma in English. And so, yeah, I mean, there was just, by the end of that, you could find scans. I was determined I wasn't going to look at, I wasn't going to do that to myself after that long. I wasn't just going to say, let me just read the last, 5 volumes translated by fans. I was like, I'm going to wait. I enjoyed it. I mean, it was something to look forward to, especially, when you were living by yourself for the first time, or you were kind of, just going through the different phases of life. It was like, well, this is a constant. This is a nice constant presence. And then after Ranma, Inuyasha, and then after Inuyasha, Rine, and then Mao. And so it's, we can. It's interesting to say I can measure, my 20s in Ranma. I can and Inuyasha. I can measure my 30s with Rine, and it's weird to say my 40s now with Mao, but that's where we are.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely not what I imagine either of you expected
No.
when you were first using GeoCities.
Not at all.
And so many of the people that we've met through our website,
Yeah.
we're still friends with to this day. That we've
That's good.
that we've traveled to meet, that we've gone to conventions, gone to Otakon, and met these people and hung out with them, and it's life changing. It has absolutely changed our lives. I will always credit Takahashi first and foremost but then the website that we've created around her has, yeah, it's just been this constant thing of positivity. I think positivity. It's something that I've never gotten tired of doing.
Yeah, it sounds great. I'm glad, cause it definitely, I definitely would worry that like there's probably a lot of people you have lost touch with, especially as a lot
Yeah,
of these
sure.
other sites just sort of disappear. And like whatever you have been able to hold on to, whatever influence this continues to have over your life, I think that's a positive because it could have easily gone in other directions.
Yeah, and there've been people that have said, that we haven't heard from in decades. They say, "Oh, I randomly was thinking about your. I typed in the address and it was still there, and you updated it, 3 days ago." And we're like, "Yeah." They said, "Oh, I haven't visited it in many years, but you're still there, and you're still chugging along, and you're still." And I said, "Yeah, yeah, we're still here, we're still doing it."
You're doing actual work that
Yeah,
like people would do for a living,
yeah,
but
Yeah,
unpaid.
yeah. We always say this is our fun job, and then there's
Yeah.
the job we have to go to pay for all this stuff.
I can't tell you how many times Harley and I have said, gotta get these damn papers graded so I can get back to translating that interview.
Yeah, many times.
That sounds great. Excellent. Well, um, I feel this has been an incredible conversation. Are there any other talking points you two would like to go over before we sign off?
Just this week, we added a search feature to the website. So I hope maybe we've had people asking for that for a while, and again, I just needed Christmas break to have time to sit down and add that. So that's online now. That was kind of a big thing we wanted to do leading into our 30th year of the website, and we hope to have some things. Dylan, do you want to talk about any of that will be?
Yeah, officially 30 years in March, and we're kind of in the initial planning stages of maybe thinking of some special stuff to do for that occasion, for that anniversary. Uh, but that definitely gives me a chance to just kind of thank everybody
Yeah.
who has been supportive of us, who has been coming to us, who uses us as a resource. Obviously, uh, we do what we do because we love it, but getting feedback and hearing from people who appreciate the resource and appreciate the website and appreciate the work that we do is just such an awesome feeling. So thank you to everybody that visits Rumic World. Thank you to everybody that says hi or emails us or has questions for us. And like I said too, if you see something on the website that crosses over with something that you're interested in, and you're just interested in if we have scans or something that maybe would help you with your fandom or your projects, please don't hesitate to reach out.
All right then. Yeah, that's all great. And once again, like I feel like you guys have done so much work for just one author. There's so much other stuff that doesn't get the same. And like to listeners, like even if you never use the website Rumic World, even if like none of that research is relevant to you, I hope everyone listening like enjoys just hearing about this, because even if this isn't relevant to you, there's probably sites out there's probably a lot of stuff. Like again, just researching stuff is fun on its own, just to know. So so yeah, as always, I like to encourage people, don't like it's cool to just find something popular on Netflix and just binge the whole thing, but like when was the last time you went like, "Hey, I never actually watched Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
Maybe I should check that
Mm-hmm.
out."
Yeah.
A lot of things that you just don't think about, that like, "Oh, I this isn't available anywhere except on like the first two seasons are on Tubi or something." Like the digging in, I feel, is the enjoyable part. For like, again, for me, it didn't need to be Ranma. It just happened to be that way. But like doing that, getting to like interview people like you and just talking about it, like that to me is the part that's important. That's the feeling I want to get across. And I would have never gotten that if this was just an anime podcast. If I just did like, well, this week we're talking about One Piece, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I'm very glad to see, this sort of experience. It definitely sounds fun. It's the sort of thing I could picture myself having gone this road if I was like slightly older and had access to the internet at a younger age. But like definitely it's been a good talk. I hope you two had fun.
Oh, we did.
For sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so any last minute things you'd like to plug?
Please visit us at Rumic World at Farinkin.com. We have the YouTube page. We try to have a new YouTube video monthly as well. And our social medias, we update there usually daily with at least some kind of tidbit from the site or just from the sort of archives that we've amassed. So please just give us a visit, reach out, leave a comment. We always just like, even if it's just to say hello, we always are just thrilled to
appreciative
and really thrilled to just hear from people.
Yeah, well, that's great. It's been a joy having you two on board. It's been fun to learn things. It's been fun to just have these talks. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I hope everyone thinks about their own stage play ideas for the Miami Mike sitcom that we need. So yeah, thank you too for coming on board. And I hope everyone appreciates the type of work you two do.
Thank you so much, Elena. Thank you for the work you do as well.
Oh yeah, thank you. Well, in that case, everyone, I usually try to have a joke to sign off on, but this feels like a genuine, serious episode. So just take care, folks. Ranma bye.